Captain Jake Morrison walked into the giant hall where the Galactic Council met. The building was huge and made him feel small. Around him sat creatures from many different worlds. Some looked like giant bugs. Others were made of crystal that sparkled in the light. A few had tentacles instead of arms. All of them were staring at the humans with cold eyes. Jake had been a soldier for 20 years. He had fought in 3 wars and saved countless lives. But today he felt like a child being called to the principal's office. The difference was that this principal could destroy entire planets. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood next to him. She wore her best blue suit and kept her face calm. Lisa had spent 10 years talking to aliens and making peace between different species. She was good at her job, very good, but even she looked nervous today. Behind them sat other humans. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks watched from the visitor section. He was young but smart. Ryan had helped design the defense systems that protected many alien worlds. Dr. Helen Murphy sat next to him. She had saved millions of alien lives with her medical work. All of them were here because the council had demands. The council speaker was a being called Zethkar. It looked like a walking mountain made of blue crystal. When it spoke, its voice sounded like breaking glass. "Humans of Earth," it said. "You have been called here to answer for your crimes against galactic peace." Jake wanted to laugh. Crimes? What crimes? Humans had done nothing but help other species for the past 50 years. They had shared their technology. They had fought off raiders and pirates. They had built hospitals and schools on alien worlds. They had asked for almost nothing in return. Zethkar began reading from a long list. "First, you are guilty of excessive military buildup. Your ships are too strong. Your weapons are too advanced. This makes other species feel unsafe." Lisa stepped forward. "Speaker Zethkar, may I remind you that human military forces have never attacked a peaceful world? We only fight to defend others." "Silence," Zethkar replied. "You will speak when we allow it." The crystal being continued reading. "Second, you spread dangerous ideas. You teach young aliens to question their leaders. You encourage them to think for themselves. This disrupts the natural order." Ryan felt his hands turn into fists. "Dangerous ideas? Like teaching kids to read? Like showing them how to use computers? Like telling them they could be anything they wanted to be?" "Third," Zethkar went on, "you advance too quickly. Your technology grows too fast. This makes other species look backward. It hurts their pride." Dr. Murphy shook her head. Pride? They were talking about pride while people died from diseases that humans could easily cure. For 3 hours, the council listed complaints. Humans were too helpful. Humans were too smart. Humans made other species feel bad about themselves. Humans asked too many questions. Humans solved problems too well. Finally, Zethkar announced the punishment. "The council has decided that humanity must be controlled. From now on, you may not build new military ships. You may not expand to new worlds. All human colonies must stay where they are now." The alien continued. "All human warships must be given to the council or destroyed. Human teachers and doctors may only work if the council approves. Human businesses may only trade with council permission." Jake felt his blood turn cold. They were basically making humans into prisoners. But Zethkar was not done. "Most importantly, Earth will be placed under council protection. Our peacekeepers will be stationed in all your major cities. They will make sure humans follow these new rules." The hall went quiet. Even the aliens seemed surprised by how harsh the punishment was. This was not about keeping peace. This was about putting humans in chains. Jake looked at Lisa, she looked at him. They both understood what was really happening here. The other species were scared of humans, not because humans were violent or cruel. They were scared because humans were better at almost everything. Human ships were faster and stronger because humans never stopped trying to improve them. Human doctors saved more lives because they cared about every patient. Human teachers were better because they believed every student could learn. Human soldiers won more battles because they fought for something they believed in. The aliens had tried to keep up, but they could not. So instead of working harder, they decided to tear humans down. Zethkar looked down at the human delegation. "What is your response to the council's decision?" All eyes turned to Jake. The other aliens expected him to argue. They thought he would threaten war or demand justice. Some probably hoped he would get angry so they could say humans were violent. Jake stood up slowly. He looked around the hall at all the alien faces. These beings had benefited from human help for decades. Humans had bled and died protecting their worlds. Humans had shared their knowledge freely. Humans had treated them as equals and friends, and this was how they repaid that friendship. Jake's voice was calm and clear when he spoke. "We understand the Council's position. Humanity accepts your decision." The words hit the hall like a bomb. Even Zethkar seemed shocked. Where were the angry speeches? Where were the threats? Where was the human pride they had heard so much about? Lisa nodded and picked up her briefcase. She had not said a word during the entire meeting. What was there to say? The Council had made up their minds before the humans even arrived. One by one, the humans stood up and walked toward the exit. Jake was the last to leave. He turned back once to look at the alien faces. Most of them looked confused. A few looked worried. They had expected a fight, but humans were not giving them one. As Jake reached the door, he heard whispers starting behind him. The aliens were already wondering if they had made a mistake. But it was too late for wondering now. The humans walked out of the council hall and into the bright sunlight outside. None of them spoke until they reached their ship. "Sir?" Ryan asked quietly. "What do we do now?" Jake looked up at the sky where human ships waited in orbit. Good ships. Strong ships. Ships that had kept the galaxy safe for 50 years. "Now," Jake said, "now we go home." The walk back to their ship was the longest walk any of them had ever taken. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued their meeting, probably celebrating their victory over the dangerous humans. They had no idea what they had just done. 3 days after the council meeting, Admiral Kevin Davis sat in his office on Earth. He was looking at reports from all over the galaxy. Human ships, bases, and people were scattered across hundreds of worlds. They were teachers, doctors, engineers, and soldiers. All of them were helping alien species in some way. Kevin had been in charge of Earth's space forces for 8 years. He had seen humans die protecting alien worlds. He had watched human families sacrifice everything to help strangers they had never met. Now the council said humans were the problem. Fine. If humans were the problem, then humans would remove themselves from the equation. Kevin picked up his communication device and sent the same message to every human commander in the galaxy. All personnel and equipment are to return to human territory immediately. Begin withdrawal from all non-human systems. No exceptions. The message was simple and clear. There would be no arguments or delays. Humans were going home. Dr. Helen Murphy was on the mining world of Kepler when the message arrived. She was working in a hospital that treated sick aliens. The local people were called Kresh. They looked like giant ants, but they were smart and kind. For the past 6 months, a terrible disease had been killing them by the thousands. Helen and her team had finally found a cure. The Kresh were getting better. Children who had been dying were now playing again. Parents who had lost hope were smiling. The hospital was full of grateful families. When Helen read the withdrawal order, she felt sick, but orders were orders. Mining Director Klecht came running into the hospital when he heard the news. He was a big Kresh with bright green eyes. "Dr. Murphy," he said through his translator, "please tell me this is not true. You cannot leave now. My people still need you." Helen looked around the hospital. Kresh patients were watching her with worried faces. Some of them were still very sick. Without her team, many would die. "I am sorry, Klecht," she said, "but we have been ordered home." "By who?" Klecht demanded. "Your government?" "By our military command," Helen replied. "The Galactic Council has decided that human involvement in alien affairs is harmful. We are respecting that decision." Helen began packing her medical equipment. The machines were advanced and expensive. She could leave behind the treatment plans, but without the proper equipment, the Kresh doctors would struggle to save lives. Klecht watched in horror as the human medical team dismantled their operation. "But the Council did not order this," he said. "They only said you could not expand your military." Helen stopped packing and looked at him. "Klecht, the Council said humans were dangerous to galactic peace. They said we spread harmful ideas and made other species uncomfortable. If that is true, then the best thing we can do is leave everyone alone." Similar scenes were happening all across the galaxy. Commander Steve Johnson was in charge of the defense platform protecting New Centauri. It was a major trade hub where ships from dozens of species came to buy and sell goods. The area was also popular with pirates and raiders. Steve had spent 3 years building a defense network that kept the raiders away. His early warning system could spot enemy ships days before they arrived. His response teams could be anywhere in the system within hours. Trade had increased by 400% since he took over. When the withdrawal order came, Steve began shutting down the defense grid. Port Administrator Veltar rushed to the command center. Veltar was a tall blue alien with 4 arms. He was smart and honest, but he had no experience with military matters. "Commander Johnson," Veltar said, "what are you doing? The defense grid is our only protection against raiders." "The Galactic Council believes human military presence is excessive," Steve replied. "We are correcting that problem." "But the raiders will come back," Veltar said. "Without your systems, they will destroy everything." Steve nodded. "You will figure something out you managed before humans arrived." "That was different," Veltar argued. "The raiders were not as organized then. They did not have the weapons they have now." Steve finished entering the shutdown codes. The massive defense platforms went dark one by one. "I am leaving you all the technical manuals," he said. "Your people should be able to keep the system running for a few months. After that, you will need to find your own solutions." Throughout the galaxy, human engineers were leaving construction sites. The great orbital cities above Proxima Beta stopped growing. The builders packed their tools and walked away from half-finished projects that had taken years to plan. Human. Teachers closed their schools and said goodbye to alien students. Some of the students cried and begged them to stay. The teachers explained that the council thought human education was harmful. If the council was right, then it was better for everyone if humans left. Human businesses began shutting down their operations on alien worlds. They had provided jobs for millions of aliens. They had brought new technologies and better ways of doing things. Now they were loading everything onto ships and heading home. Captain Jake Morrison's ship, the UES Liberty, was one of the last to leave the council sector. As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, his communications officer reported incoming messages. "Sir, we have urgent calls from the Vegan Collective, the Tau Ceti Alliance, and the Centaurian Trade Union. They want to speak with you about the withdrawal." Jake thought about it for a moment. A month ago, he would have taken those calls. He would have listened to their concerns and tried to help solve their problems. But that was when humans were partners in galactic civilization. "Tell them humanity wishes them well," Jake said. "We are going home." The communications officer sent the polite message and then cut off all incoming signals. The Liberty jumped to faster-than-light speed and began the long journey back to Earth. Behind them, alien governments were starting to panic. They were sending desperate messages to every human ship they could contact. Most humans ignored the calls. A few sent brief replies saying they were following orders. Dr. Helen Murphy was on one of the medical ships heading home. She had left, behind detailed treatment plans for the Kresh plague, but she knew it would not be enough. Without proper equipment and training, many Kresh would die. She felt terrible about abandoning sick patients, but she also felt angry. The council had called human medical work cultural contamination. They said humans made other species too dependent on outside help. Well, now the aliens could prove how independent they really were. Commander Steve Johnson was on a transport ship with other military personnel. He had spent years of his life protecting alien trade routes. He had lost friends in battles with pirates. He had worked 18-hour days to keep innocent people safe. The council said his work made aliens feel bad about their own military capabilities. They said human weapons were too advanced and made other species nervous. Fine. Let them protect themselves with their own capabilities. Back on Earth, Admiral Kevin Davis was watching the reports come in. Every day, more human ships arrived in the solar system. They brought people and equipment from all over the galaxy. Some brought disturbing news about what was happening in the places they had left behind. The withdrawal was going exactly as planned. In 2 weeks, every human outside of human territory would be home. Earth's colonies were preparing to receive millions of refugees. The economy was already changing to support all the returning personnel. Kevin had expected some resistance from human commanders. He thought some would refuse to abandon their posts. But every single order had been followed without question. Humans understood loyalty and duty. What surprised Kevin was how easy it had been to leave. For 50 years, humans had thought they were essential to galactic civilization. They had believed other species needed their help to survive and prosper. But leaving had taken less than 2 weeks. If humans were really that important, would not someone have tried to stop them? Would not the Council have realized their mistake and begged humans to stay? Instead, there was only silence from the alien governments. Maybe the Council was right. Maybe humans were not as necessary as they had thought. Time would tell. 2 weeks after the last human ship left alien space, the first disaster struck. Captain Elena Rodriguez was sitting in her new office on Mars when the reports started coming in. She had spent 5 years fighting pirates in the Outer Rim territories. Her intelligence network had covered dozens of star systems. Her rapid response teams had kept the trade routes safe. Now she was director of colonial security for the human settlements on Mars. It was a good job, but it felt strange to only worry about human problems. The first report came from the Vegan Collective. 3 cargo ships had been destroyed by the Crimson Raiders in a single day. The ships had been carrying food and medicine to colony worlds. Without those supplies, people would go hungry and sick. Elena read the report with interest but no surprise. The Crimson Raiders were smart and well organized. They had been waiting for the humans to leave. Without human patrol ships and early warning systems, the Raiders could attack wherever they wanted. The second report was worse. The Centaurian Trade Union had lost an entire convoy of 12 ships. The Raiders had used a new tactic, hitting multiple targets at once. The alien defense forces had been caught completely off guard. By the end of the week, pirate attacks had increased by 800%. The aliens were losing ships faster than they could build them. Trade routes that had been safe for years were now death traps. Counselor Yithmek of the Vegan Collective sent an urgent message to Earth. She was a purple-skinned alien with large eyes and a thin voice. Elena had worked with her before and knew she was smart and honest. Captain Rodriguez, the message began. Our shipping is under constant attack. We have lost 30 ships in 5 days. Our own forces cannot respond quickly enough. Please, we need human military assistance. The response came from Colonel Amy Phillips at Earth Defense Command. Amy was Elena's replacement as head of anti-piracy operations. Her message was polite but firm. We appreciate your difficult situation, Amy said, but the Galactic Council determined that human military involvement was problematic. We respect that decision and wish you success in protecting your own shipping. Elena almost felt sorry for Yithmek. The Vegan were peaceful traders who had never needed a strong military. They had relied on human protection for decades. Now they were learning what the galaxy was like without human peacekeepers. But Elena's sympathy did not last long. The Vegan had voted to support the Council's decision against humanity. They had agreed that human military forces were excessive and threatening. Well, now they could see what excessive really meant. The medical crisis started at the same time. Dr. Helen Murphy was working in her new laboratory in Antarctica when she heard about the plague outbreak on Kepler. The creche were dying again. Without human medical support, the alien doctors could not keep up with the disease. Helen had left behind detailed treatment plans and basic equipment, but fighting the plague required constant research and adaptation. The disease kept changing, and the creche doctors could not change their treatments fast enough. Within a month, the death toll on Kepler reached 50,000. Mining Director Klecht sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for help. Helen read every message but did not reply. The Council had called human. Medical work cultural contamination. They said it made alien species too, dependent on outside help. Now the creche could prove how independent they really were. The plague was not limited to Kepler. Similar outbreaks began appearing on other worlds where humans had been providing medical support. The alien doctors tried their best, but they lacked the training and equipment to handle serious diseases. Dr. Sarah Kim had been working on a universal vaccine before the withdrawal. She was close to a breakthrough that could have prevented future plague outbreaks, but the research required resources and knowledge that only humans possessed. Without human scientists, the project died. The construction disasters were the most visible failures. The great engineering projects that defined galactic civilization began falling apart without human expertise. Engineer Paul Carter was Elena's brother. He had spent 10 years working on the Andromeda Gateway project. The gateway was supposed to create a stable wormhole to another galaxy. It was the most ambitious project in galactic history, involving dozens of species and trillions of credits. Paul was now working on a similar project for human space. From his office on Europa, he watched the news reports about the gateway with grim satisfaction. The alien engineers had tried to continue the work without human help, but they did not understand the complex mathematics involved in wormhole physics. The gravitational calculations were wrong. The exotic matter containment was failing. The entire project was becoming unstable. 3 weeks after the humans left, the gateway suffered a major malfunction. The partial wormhole collapsed, creating a dangerous gravitational anomaly. The explosion destroyed 2 construction ships and damaged the main platform. The project that was supposed to unite 2 galaxies had become a hazard to navigation. Ships had to avoid the entire system because of the unstable space-time effects. Similar disasters were happening across the galaxy. Fusion reactors that had run perfectly for years were shutting down because alien technicians could not perform proper maintenance. Atmospheric processors on terraformed worlds were producing poisonous gas because the chemical balances were wrong. The quantum communication network was failing. Humans had maintained the delicate equipment that allowed instant communication across the galaxy. Without human technicians, the quantum entanglement arrays were breaking down one by one. Professor Dan Mitchell had designed most of the communication network. He was now working on a human-only version from his laboratory on the moon. He watched the galactic network collapse with professional interest. The irony, he told his assistant, is that we offered to train alien technicians for years. They said the work was too boring and complicated. They preferred to let humans handle the technical details. Now the aliens were learning that technical details mattered. When communication systems failed, trade became almost impossible. When ships could not talk to each other, accidents happened. When planets could not call for help, emergencies became disasters. The biggest shock came when the Void Hunters attacked. The Void Hunters were ancient machines that hated all organic life. They had been dormant for centuries, but something had awakened them. Admiral Lisa Kim had been in charge of the early warning system that watched for Void Hunter activity. She had coordinated the defense networks that kept the machines contained in the dark space between stars. Now she was director of human colonial defense, planning the expansion of human settlements. The first Void Hunter attack hit the border systems of the Altarian Republic. 3 planets were sterilized before the aliens even knew what was happening. The machines used weapons that turned living matter into dust. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. Admiral Kethron of the Altarian Navy sent a desperate message to Lisa. She had worked with him for years and considered him a friend. But friendship was a luxury that humans could no longer afford. Admiral Kim, his message said, our forces are being destroyed. The Void Hunters are using tactics we have never seen before. They seem to know exactly where our ships will be. We need your strategic knowledge. Lisa's response was professional and brief. I am no longer involved in galactic defense matters. I suggest consulting the Council's military advisors. The truth was that the Void Hunters had been studying galactic defenses for years. They had learned to exploit every weakness in the alien-managed systems. Without human strategic planning, the defense networks had blind spots that the machines could easily exploit. Within a week, the Void Hunters had overrun 6 star systems. Billions of aliens were dead or missing. The machines were adapting their tactics faster than the aliens could respond. Council Speaker Zethkar finally did something that no Council Speaker had ever done. He sent a formal apology to the human government. The message came with a desperate plea for military assistance. President Robert Hayes read the message in his office in Washington. He was a calm man who had led humanity through many crises, but even he was shocked by how quickly the galaxy had fallen apart. The president's response was polite but firm. Humanity accepts the Council's apology and appreciates the gravity of the current situation. However, the Council made its position clear regarding human involvement in galactic affairs. We respect that decision and wish you success in resolving these challenges independently. The message was copied to every major news network in human space. Within hours, every human knew that the aliens were begging for help. The same aliens who had called humans dangerous and threatening were now admitting they could not survive without human assistance. But it was too late for simple apologies. The galaxy was burning, and humans were no longer willing to put out the fire. 3 months after humanity's withdrawal, the galactic economy was falling apart. Director Nancy Young was enjoying her retirement on a ranch in Colorado when the first desperate call came in. She had managed supply chains for half the galaxy during her 20-year career at Stellar Logistics Corporation. Now she spent her days riding horses and reading books. The call came from Trade Minister Vexilon of the Tau Ceti Alliance. His species looked like giant slugs, but they were excellent at organizing complex systems. At least they used to be. Director Young, Vexilon said through the video link, "Our entire shipping network is collapsing. Food deliveries are 3 weeks late. Medical supplies are stuck in warehouses because our routing systems have failed. We need your expertise." Nancy sipped her coffee and looked out at the mountains. It was a beautiful day. "I'm sorry, Minister Vexilon, but I'm retired. Perhaps the Council can provide assistance." "The Council has no one with your experience," Vexilon pleaded. "You designed most of these systems. You are the only one who understands how they work." Nancy almost laughed. For 15 years she had tried to train alien managers to understand supply chain logistics. They had always been too busy or too proud to learn the details. They preferred to let humans handle the boring work while they focused on big-picture decisions. "I offered to train your people many times," Nancy said. "You told me it was unnecessary because humans would always be available to manage the technical aspects." She ended the call and went back to reading her book. Outside, her horses grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun. It was much more relaxing than trying to coordinate shipping schedules for ungrateful aliens. The supply chain failures were getting worse every day. Food shortages were causing riots on dozens of worlds. Mineral-rich planets that could not grow their own food were running out of basic supplies. Industrial worlds that depended on imported raw materials were shutting down their factories. The problem was not just about moving goods from one place to another. Human logistics experts had created complex systems that balanced supply and demand across hundreds of worlds. They had predicted seasonal changes, planned for emergencies, and optimized shipping routes to save time and money. Without human management, the alien administrators were making simple mistakes that cascaded into major disasters. They would send too much food to worlds that did not need it while other worlds starved. They would ship winter clothing to desert planets and cooling units to ice worlds. The technological breakdowns were even worse. Human-designed systems throughout the galaxy were failing as alien. Technicians tried to maintain equipment they did not really understand. "Professor," Dan Mitchell received daily reports about the quantum communication network. Entire sectors were going dark as the alien technicians made critical errors. They would try to fix one problem and create 3 new ones. "The worst part," Dan told his research team, "is that they are not learning from their mistakes. They keep making the same errors over and over again." The atmospheric processors on New Sydney were producing toxic gas because the alien operators had changed the wrong settings. The orbital factories above Centauri Prime were manufacturing defective products because the quality control systems were not working properly. The weather control satellites around Paradise World were creating dangerous storms instead of pleasant sunshine. Each failure made the aliens more desperate. They sent increasingly frantic messages to human experts, offering huge amounts of money for consultation services. Most humans ignored the offers completely. Dr. Helen Murphy was one of the few who bothered to respond to the medical emergency calls. Her replies were always the same. The Galactic Council determined that human medical involvement constituted cultural contamination. "We are respecting that decision." The plague outbreaks were spreading faster than the aliens could contain them. The Kresh on Kepler were nearly extinct. The insectoid Thrax were losing entire hive cities to a variant of the disease that their doctors could not treat. The crystalline Zalari were developing a new syndrome that made their bodies crack and shatter. Dr. Sarah Kim had the knowledge to create vaccines for all these diseases. She was working on them in her new laboratory, but only for human use. If the diseases ever spread to human space, her people would be protected. The aliens would have to find their own solutions. The construction disasters were becoming more frequent and more deadly. The Andromeda Gateway project had been completely abandoned after the 3rd major explosion. The unstable wormhole effects were spreading, making an entire star system too dangerous to enter. Engineer Paul Carter watched the reports with professional interest. They are trying to fix problems they do not understand, he explained to his colleagues. It's like trying to perform brain surgery with a hammer. The great orbital cities were falling out of their planned orbits because the aliens could not maintain the complex gravitational systems. The massive space elevators were developing dangerous vibrations that could cause catastrophic failures. The terraforming projects were turning garden worlds into poisonous wastelands. Each disaster made the next one more likely. As infrastructure failed, it became harder to fix other problems. As communication systems broke down, coordination became impossible. As transportation networks collapsed, essential supplies could not reach where they were needed. The final blow came when the Void Hunters launched their largest offensive in centuries. Admiral Lisa Kim was in her office on Mars when the reports started arriving. The ancient machines had been studying galactic defenses during their apparent dormancy. Now they were exploiting every weakness with ruthless efficiency. The first wave of attacks hit 12 systems simultaneously. The Void Hunters used coordinated tactics that the alien commanders had never seen before. They jammed communications, deployed electronic warfare systems, and adapted their strategies in real time. Admiral Kethrin of the Altarian Navy was a good officer, but he had always relied on human strategic support. Without Lisa's expertise, he was fighting blind against an enemy that seemed to predict his every move. The Void Hunters overran system after system with mechanical precision. They did not negotiate or show mercy. They simply sterilized every world they encountered, turning living planets into dead rocks floating in space. The alien military commanders sent desperate pleas to every human admiral they could contact. Most humans did not respond at all. A few sent brief messages referring the aliens to Council military advisors. The truth was that the Council had no military advisors with real experience. They had always depended on human strategic planning and tactical expertise. Their own officers were politicians and administrators, not warriors. President Robert Hayes received a personal visit from Council Speaker Zethkar. The crystalline being arrived on Earth with a small fleet of Council ships. It was the first time a Council Speaker had ever visited the human homeworld. The meeting took place in the White House. Zethkar had to duck to fit through the doorways, and his crystal body clinked against the furniture. President Hayes offered him a chair, but the alien could not sit down without breaking it. President Hayes, Zethkar began, I come to acknowledge our terrible mistake. The Council was wrong to restrict human activities. We now understand that human involvement was essential to galactic stability. Hayes nodded politely. I appreciate your honesty, Speaker Zethkar. However, the Council's decision was based on careful consideration of human impact on galactic civilization. If that analysis was correct, then our withdrawal should be beneficial for everyone. The analysis was completely wrong, Zethkar admitted. We underestimated human contributions and overestimated our own capabilities. Without human support, galactic civilization is collapsing. Hayes poured himself a cup of tea and offered one to the alien. Zethkar could not drink liquids, but he appreciated the gesture. The galaxy is learning valuable lessons about self-reliance, Hayes said calmly. Surely that is a positive development. Zethkar's crystal body flickered with distress patterns. President Hayes, 1/3 of galactic civilization is under threat of extinction. The Void Hunters are destroying everything. Our economies have collapsed. Our technology is failing. We are facing a return to pre-spaceflight barbarism. Hayes sipped his tea thoughtfully. That does sound challenging. But I must ask, why should humanity become involved again? The Council made it very clear that human participation was harmful to galactic peace. The desperation in Zethkar's voice was obvious even through his artificial translator. What do you want from us? Technology? Resources? Territory? Political power? Name your price. Hayes smiled, but it was not a warm expression. Speaker Zethkar, you misunderstand the situation. Humanity does not want anything from the galaxy. We have discovered that we are perfectly capable of managing our own affairs. The president walked to the window and looked out at the peaceful city. We have established 23 new colonies in the past 3 months. We have developed breakthrough technologies in medicine, engineering, and physics. Our standard of living is higher than it ever was during our galactic period. He turned back to face the alien leader. The galaxy taught us an important lesson. We learned that we do not need you. We learned to walk away silently when we are not wanted. The question now is, what are you willing to do to convince us that we are wanted? Zethkar's crystal body went compal 6 months after humanity walked away. The galaxy was dying. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat in her office in Geneva, reading reports that would have been unthinkable a year ago. She was now Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Relations, but there were no relations left to manage. The galaxy had become a collection of isolated, failing worlds. The Void Hunters controlled 37 star systems and showed no signs of slowing down. Their ancient machines had perfected the art of total destruction. Every world they touched became a lifeless rock. The organic species that had once filled the galaxy with art, music, and culture were being systematically erased. The Crimson Plague had mutated into dozens of different strains. Without human medical research, the aliens could not keep up with the changes. Entire species were going extinct as their doctors struggled with diseases that human scientists could have cured in weeks. Trade had collapsed to levels not seen since before space travel. The complex networks that had connected hundreds of worlds were broken beyond repair. Planets that could not feed themselves were watching their populations starve. Industrial worlds were shutting down as they ran out of raw materials. But the most devastating report came from the mining world of Kepler. Dr. Helen Murphy read it 3 times before she could believe it. Mining Director Klecht was dead. So were his children. The creche population had dropped from 50 million to less than 8,000 in 6 months. Helen stared at the message for a long time. She remembered Klecht's bright green eyes and his desperate pleas for help. She remembered the creche children who had recovered from the plague thanks to human medicine. Most of them were dead now. The message had been sent by one of the last surviving creche administrators. Dr. Murphy, it read, Klecht spoke of you often before he died. He said humans were the best friends his people ever had. He was sorry that we did not appreciate your help when we had it. Please remember us kindly. Helen deleted the message without responding. The council had called human medical work cultural contamination. They had said it made alien species too dependent on outside help. Well, the creche had proven their independence. They had died for it, but they had proven it. Similar messages were arriving from all over the galaxy. Former patients were dying. Former students were begging for one more lesson. Former colleagues were admitting that they could not handle their jobs without human support. Commander Steve Johnson received a final transmission from Port Administrator Veltar at New Centauri. The trade hub had fallen to pirates 3 weeks ago. Veltar was hiding in the ruins of his office, waiting for a rescue that would never come. Commander Johnson, Veltar's weak voice said, I wanted to thank you for the years of protection you gave us. I also wanted to apologize. We supported the Council's decision because we were jealous of human success. We thought we could do your job just as well. We were wrong. Very wrong. The transmission ended with the sound of explosions in the background. Veltar and his staff were never heard from again. Steve was now director of asteroid mining operations in the Sol system. It was good work, and he enjoyed the challenge of organizing complex mining operations. But sometimes he remembered the grateful merchants who had thanked him for keeping their trade routes safe. Most of them were probably dead now. The breaking point came when the Void Hunters achieved something that had been thought impossible. They cracked the quantum encryption that protected all galactic communications. Suddenly, every military message, every diplomatic transmission, and every personal call could be intercepted and analyzed by the ancient machines. Professor Dan Mitchell had warned about this possibility years ago. He had designed additional security layers for the communication system, but the alien technicians had called them unnecessarily complex and refused to implement them. They preferred the simpler version that was easier to maintain. Now the Void Hunters could read every alien transmission in real time. They knew where every ship was going before it arrived. They knew every defense plan before it was implemented. They knew every evacuation route before the refugees started moving. The human communication networks were still secure because they used Dan's unnecessarily complex encryption. Human ships could talk to each other without fear of interception. Human military forces could coordinate their movements without giving away their plans. But humans were only talking to other humans now. The final delegation arrived at Earth exactly 7 months after the Council's original verdict. It was the largest diplomatic mission in galactic history. Representatives from every surviving species came to beg for human help. Council Speaker Zethkar led the delegation, But he was not the same proud being who had announced humanity's punishment. His crystal body was cracked and dim. Several of his limbs had been damaged in a Void Hunter attack on the council station. He moved slowly and spoke quietly. Ambassador Lisa Carter met them in the same conference room where humanity had first joined galactic civilization 50 years ago. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. This was where it had all begun, and this was where it might end. Madam Secretary, Zethkar began, we come not as leaders, but as survivors. We come to acknowledge our catastrophic error and to beg for humanity's forgiveness. Lisa consulted her notes with deliberate care. She had all the time in the world now. Speaker Zethkar, the Council's previous decision was quite clear. Humanity was deemed a destabilizing influence on galactic civilization. Our military capabilities were labeled excessive. Our technology was called dangerous. Our cultural influence was termed harmful. We were completely wrong, admitted Counselor Yithmek. Her purple skin had faded to a sickly gray. We let pride and jealousy cloud our judgment. We destroyed the very foundation of our civilization because we could not admit that humans were better at almost everything. Perhaps, Lisa replied. But decisions have consequences. The Council chose to manage galactic affairs without human involvement. How has that worked out? The silence stretched for nearly 2 minutes. Finally, Counselor Vrex of the Tau Ceti Alliance spoke. His slug-like body was much smaller than it had been 6 months ago. Food shortages had affected everyone. 1/3 of galactic civilization is extinct, he said quietly. Our economies have collapsed completely. Our defensive networks have failed. Our technology is breaking down faster than we can repair it. We are facing the complete destruction of everything we built over thousands of years. Lisa nodded sympathetically. That does sound challenging. However, I must ask, why should humanity risk becoming involved in galactic affairs again? After all, the Council determined that our involvement was problematic. The desperation in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The alien delegates had come prepared to offer anything: territory, resources, technology, complete political control. They had not prepared for being politely reminded of their own words. What do you want? Counselor Yithmek finally asked. What will it take for humanity to help us? Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Nothing you can give us. Humanity has discovered that we are perfectly capable of managing our own affairs. We have established 31 new colonies in the past 6 months. We have developed revolutionary technologies in every field. We have achieved a standard of living higher than anything we had during our galactic period. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, human ships came and went with quiet efficiency. The spaceport was busier than it had ever been, but all the traffic was human. Earth was the center of a growing civilization that belonged entirely to humanity. The galaxy taught us a valuable lesson, Lisa continued. We learned that we do not need you. We learned to walk away silently when we are not wanted. We learned that sometimes the best response to injustice is not anger or violence, but simple withdrawal of cooperation. She turned back to face the desperate aliens. The question now is not what we want from you. The question is what you are willing to do to convince us that we are wanted as equal partners, not as servants to be blamed for every problem. Zethkar's crystal body flickered with patterns of submission. Anything. We will accept any terms. Full equality, shared leadership, complete autonomy for human space. Whatever you require. Lisa considered this for a moment. Those are big promises, Speaker Zethkar. But trust is not rebuilt with words. It is rebuilt with actions over time. She returned to her seat and opened a new file. If humanity decides to help, it will be on our terms. Human colonies will have complete autonomy. Human ships will follow human commands. Human technology will be shared only with species that prove themselves trustworthy allies. The negotiations that followed would reshape galactic civilization completely. But for the first time in the galaxy's history, humanity would not be the ones making compromises. Outside the conference room windows, human children played in parks that their parents had built. Human scientists worked in laboratories that explored the frontiers of knowledge. Human engineers designed ships that would carry their species to new stars. Whether they would share that bright future with anyone else remained entirely up to them. The galaxy had learned too late that some things once lost could never be taken for.